is track season for a lot of students, and especially around here these days. Spring is track season, so all those throwers and jumpers and runners are busy getting ready for all their meets and all their competitions. We have, as our family, has been spending a good share of time at some track meets lately. They're fun. I mean, they're a lot of fun. A couple thousand parents and fans and others cheering on their kids as they're, running all over the place and going here and there and trying to find their spot. Kimberly and I have had a lot of fun. We've been coaching Madeline's track team, and it's so much fun. I mean, you get to know the kids, and you get to teach them a little bit from, our limited knowledge. But more than that, you just get to encourage them and get to know them and help them along a little bit as they're learning to jump or throw or put or run or hand off or whatever it is that they happen to be doing at the time. The track meets usually begin in the early evening, usually around 5. They go a long time into the darkness of the night, depending on how many people are there and how many events, but they do last quite a while. And we've noticed this interesting trend that happens at all the track meets. Everybody's there, at the beginning. And there's the national anthem, everybody's cheering, everybody's ready for the first event, everybody's super excited, you've got bells that are ringing, you've got horns blowing, you've got people shouting and screaming and cheering. And I mean, it's a couple thousand strong, so there's a lot of sound bouncing all over the place. It gets loud. As the evening goes on, and the kids start to finish their events, the fans trickle out. So there aren't quite as many as the evening goes on. And we feel bad for the kids who have the final event, which is the 200. So, when they call all the kids over to the opposite side of the track to run their 200, the kids all go over there and, they announce and the gun goes off for the first 200. And, you have some cheering, but it's noticeably quieter than it was 2 hours before that. By the time the last 200 race finishes, there might be 100 people there. A couple weeks ago, there were like 30 people there. I mean, it was quiet. And I wanted to tell these kids, look, you're last, but you're not the least. Last, but not least. We have just had Easter. And we had some great moments. I know you had some great moments with your family, with your friends, with others. We had some great moments here at church. We had some of the best resurrection donuts that ever have been. We had lots of fun with a great group at our sunrise service out on the lawn. We had a great time, learning and laughing and worshiping in here. We had probably, we're thinking it was our largest Easter egg hunt that we've had ever in all the years that we've done it. They're great times. And the tomb was found empty and Jesus rose. God rose Jesus from the dead and he was risen. He was risen indeed. It was Easter. And it's like, that's it. The weeks leading up to that, the season we called Lent, we talked about pausing. We talked about all the things that we could be doing to recognize and pay attention to the work of God. We walked through this whole season and did all kinds of things. And Easter happened, and it was great. And it's like, we're done. Or are we? We're not done. The Gospels are not done. Because the last event in the Gospels is not the resurrection of Jesus and the empty tomb. The 4 biographies, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, of Jesus, all tell the last part of the story a little differently. Each one includes a little bit different event of what all happened after the tomb was found empty. That's the last episode in the Gospels and in the life of Jesus when he was here. We need the last episode. I mean, we think the resurrection was the last, and we celebrate it, we lead up to it, but it's not. There's something else that happens, and we need to see and explore and know what is the last that is definitely not the least event in the gospel stories about Jesus. We need these because it's in these events that Jesus really does call us and show us and grow us what it means to follow him fully and faithfully. So for the next several weeks, we're going to look at these events. Matthew includes one event. He has one event after the tomb is found empty, one event, one encounter, one thing that happens. We need, however, to recap a little of what happened because it's kind of strange what Matthew shows happens. We know that a couple days before, there was the cross on which Jesus died, there was the burial of Jesus in the tomb, and then there was the discovery that the tomb was empty. We know that episode. But how about the week before that? The week before, one of Jesus' closest friends turned on him, accepted a bribe, and sold him out. Judas betrayed Jesus, right in the company of all their closest friends. One of the others in that group, Peter, he also denied Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and wouldn't admit to people that he was a follower of Jesus. The rest of the disciples, they seem to be a little scattered, maybe not present in everything. They're somewhere, but they don't seem to be behind Jesus like they have been. And then there's the larger crowd of people who are learning from Jesus and following Jesus. They don't seem to be the greatest champions of Jesus either at this phase in Jesus' life. So Jesus had a tough few days with his friends and his allies and the people who were on his side. All of that group, the disciples and the larger crowd that was following Jesus, happened to, it seems, be together when that group of women left early in the morning. They found the tomb empty. They came back and told everybody that he's risen from the dead. The tomb is empty. Disciples, you got to go to Galilee to have to rendezvous with Jesus because that's what he said to do. And they do. And here's what happens in Matthew. Then the 11 disciples left for Galilee, going to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some of them doubted. Jesus came and told his disciples, I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. I must admit, I have a few questions for Jesus. Are you sure about this? Is this really the group you should be telling this to? Are these not the people who just sold you out, betrayed you, denied you, wouldn't admit to even knowing you or following you? Are you quite certain this is the group you should be giving your entire mission to and handing over the most valuable parts of who you are and what you're all about? Is this the right group? I'm not so sure that's the right group because what did this group do? Well, for one thing, this is the 11 disciples. We're more familiar with the 12 disciples. This is the first moment and the only time that they're described as the 11 disciples, which really highlights the fact that one of them is no longer with them. And who's to say that nobody else is going to trickle out? And it might be the 10 or the 9 or the 8. I mean, Jesus, do you really want to tell them to do this when your group is waning? In fact, what did they do when they saw Jesus just now? They worshipped him, but some of them doubted. I can think of a lot of people who should be given this mission. I mean, I think about the women who went to the tomb, who found Jesus, who heard the angels, who got super excited, who actually brought the message back. They should get the commission. They should get the message from Jesus.
Wow.
Or what about Lazarus and his family? Oh, they had a couple episodes recently with Jesus that were amazing. They were striving to follow Jesus. You know, they anoints Jesus with that valuable perfume just days before. They should get the commission. Or some people who actually stuck with Jesus. Some of the people, whoever they were, who did. How about Joseph of Arimathea, who provided the tomb for Jesus and who buried Jesus? He should get the commission. Or some intelligent people, some educated people, some missionary people, some people who have followed Jesus, followed God their whole lives. They should be getting this message. But the disciples? Why did they get it? Because Jesus calls normal people, like you and me. He doesn't just call the perfect, he doesn't just call the capable, he doesn't just call the really good, he calls normal people. People who worship him and also doubt him. It's normal. We don't have to be perfect. We can still follow Jesus. We don't have to be good enough to still get the job to do Jesus' work. Jesus calls anybody. So what does he call us to do? I mean, we know in the passage, we know what he calls us to do. It's to make disciples, but how does this work? What is he calling us to do? It kind of reads, doesn't it, like a graduation speech? I mean, it's kind of like, this is graduation season. You know, we just prayed for our college students. It's nearing the end of school, and graduation is there. And you know how the graduation speeches tend to go. You are all at the cusp and the precipice of the end of your education. We have trained you. Your minds are full. You are ripe and ready to go out and fill the world with all the gifts and intelligence and passion that you have to be able to change the world. The world has never seen this kind of student, this kind of young adult who is going to bring innovation and transformation to the world. This is your age and your time. And isn't that kind of like Jesus says, go, make disciples of all nations, baptizing them and teaching them all that I have taught you, and I will be with you always, even until the end of the age. Yes, go, change the world. So what are we supposed to do? What are we called to do? To make disciples. Now, that sounds kind of intimidating to me. How do we make disciples? I mean, that sounds to me like, like a cookie cutter and putting the dough in the cookie cutter, or like a springform pan and pouring everything in and it just fits right. Making disciples. And there's so much more to it. There's so much more that Jesus is talking about than just forming and structuring and forcing and making disciples like we might sometimes think. 4 things that Jesus is certainly talking about here. First one has to do not with making disciples, but inspiring disciples. Inspire people to follow. Stir people. Motivate people. Prompt people. Push people. Encourage people. Persuade people. Help people. Sway people. To make disciples is to inspire people to follow. A disciple is a follower. A disciple isn't a graduate. A disciple isn't one who has received a ribbon. A disciple is not one who has achieved. It is a person who is following, who hasn't followed. It's not somebody who has already followed. It is somebody who is following. Normal people like you and me who are following. When Jesus talked about, and when people asked Jesus, what is the most important thing that people could ever do in following God, in being disciples of God? We know what Jesus said. He said it over and over. It's famous. Love God and love other people. This is the most important thing we can do in following God. How do we make disciples? How do we encourage, sway, promote, prompt, help, inspire followers? We love them. We love God and we love others to such an extent that people are inspired to follow Jesus as well. Jesus described to his disciples, "A new commandment I give you, a commandment to love one another." It wasn't anything brand new, it was just a new way of talking about it. Love one another. And all the rest of the New Testament writers picked up on this theme too, that love is the way to go. We have nothing if we don't have love. The greatest of the greatest things is love. Loving people is how we prove that we follow Jesus. Love overcomes a multitude of sins. We love because God first loved us, and love wins. All these New Testament creations are descriptions of how love can work. Showing people genuine, real love is so often what inspires others. Right? How many times has somebody done something generous for you, something loving, and you've rejected it? You know, I don't want that. No, I don't need that. No. But do we want it? I mean, somebody gives us something, somebody's generous, somebody's loving, we're like, wow, that's awesome. I'm humble, I'm thankful, I'm appreciative. We don't reject love very often. We accept and receive, and they're blown away by somebody being willing to love us. Inspiring is often how disciples are made. So how do we do this? I love what Jesus says. He doesn't say, "Richard, go make disciples. Jim, go make disciples. Ashley, go." No, he says, "You all." Every one of these commands or calls to us is you all go. You all make. You all teach. You all baptize. This is a unified, a together, a partnership thing. Whenever Jesus sent out the disciples, he never sent them out as individuals. You know, when he sent them out to do tasks or to do different things, he sent them out in pairs or as a group, as a team. He knew you need each other. You got to make up for where each other lacks. You need others to help improve where you're short. You need others to see things that you wouldn't otherwise see. We need each other in inspiring others to follow Jesus. It's not about me. It's about us. It's not about any one of us. It's about all of us. Also, Jesus says this wild thing about authority. And he talks about, he claims to have all authority in heaven and earth because disciples get made by God's power, not by our power. So that's why he claims to have all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. So what's that about? Well, it's that God has given Jesus all this authority in heaven and earth to then commission us to go and inspire followers of Jesus. It's like when the authority is passed on from the person who has it to the person who needs it. How often did Jesus send out his disciples with the authority to heal, with the authority to cast out demons? They didn't have the authority in and of themselves. They had no ability to do any of that. It was only because Jesus gave them that authority that then they were capable of doing those miraculous and unexplainable things. All authority has been given to Jesus, and he sends us with his authority. So to follow Jesus and to make disciples is to carry Jesus' authority in order to inspire followers of Jesus. We all know that the act of following Jesus, to turning our minds and our hearts and our wills and our surrendering to God, that's not something we can do. That's impossible for us to do. That internal, that mysterious work, that's the work of God alone. We can't force or change people. Only God can do that work. And it's by his power and not our power. Interesting thing, where were all of the disciples with Jesus when they met together and Jesus told them this? They went away and they went to meet Jesus on the mountain in Galilee. If we were really true to form and trying to really identify with what Jesus was saying and where he was saying it and how he was saying it, I actually think we would all probably need to get up and go out the door to the parking lot, or better yet, go across to Walgreens or Lowe's or Dutch Bros and just hang out in their parking lot and talk about making disciples. Because Jesus was not in the church talking about needing to make disciples. He was out in Galilee. He was in the faraway lands, in the place that was not the center and the hub of their faith. He's saying, this is the spot to make disciples, because disciples can be made anywhere. There is a world full of people who need to be inspired to follow Jesus. And you and I have been given all authority by Jesus to be able to inspire others to follow Jesus. So, go, River Cross Church. Inspire followers in your neighborhoods, at the grocery store, at the park, in the classroom, at the office, in the field, wherever we are. Teach them to follow Jesus, to obey everything that Jesus taught us, and inspire them by your love to be able to know the God who created them. And surely Jesus will be with you even to the end of the age.